This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz. Very excited to be speaking with Lesli Linka Glatter about Zero Day. How are you, Leslie?
Hi, I'm good, Abe. Nice to meet you and glad to be talking with you this fine morn.
Same. I know that you've done your share of espionage, government conspiracy related time over the course of your career. What was it about Zero Day that really hooked you in?
Good question. Well, I love the political thriller because you can hang so much interesting, complicated stories juxtaposed with morally complicated, layered, complex characters. So it's a great vehicle to tell all kinds of both personal and political stories. And I read the first script of Zero Day and I was on the edge of my seat. I was in. And then I met with Eric Newman, who created Narcos, and Noah Oppenheim, who wrote the screenplay for Jackie and was head of NBC News for many years until the last year. And Michael Schmidt, who's a two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning correspondent for the New York Times. And they were all the co-creators. And Robert De Niro, one of my favorite actors of all times, who was there from the beginning. And we met. It was a meeting of the minds. We developed the subsequent 5 hours, and I directed all episodes. And it was an incredible collaboration. And like all the things I'm pulled to, it's based on a huge amount of research. Yes, it is a paranoid conspiracy thriller, but it is very much based on fact. And I love doing that kind of research. I want it to be realistically real. And as far as I'm concerned, dealing with the idea of what is truth in a post-truth world when we can't differentiate between fact and opinion is like an incredible thing to be dealing with in a dramatic way.
I also think that much like Homeland reflected the time that it was, airing. This show is very much about that because there's the level of quickness of communication that exists is so, it's so easy to spread stuff, and it's so interesting to see the, various personalities, played by Dan and Gabby that we have on the show, and just
Yes.
how they're so electric, but also so easily spread something and then easily just disappear in an instant.
Absolutely. And, again, this whole idea of each character's moral compass and what is your relationship to truth, especially when you are dealing with these back rooms of power. And I always want to know what goes on there. How are these decisions made? What do the conversations feel like? And, with this team of writers who have so much research and real world experience. I mean, it definitely, I went back to many of my Homeland sources in terms of, Homeland was very reality based. That's where the seasons would come from, was meeting with the heads of CIA, NSA, DNI, State Department. And this very much came out of that, a very different kind of show that came out of that realistically real world. But of course, it's a story. It's a narrative story. And I also dealing with issues of acuity and leadership. And
When you're
ironically, we made this, a year before it actually was released, and it became even more relevant.
when you're
Ironically.
talking about
Yeah.
the idea of what is the truth, I think as a director you have to choose what you share with audiences because we can only know a certain something. So how does that affect your approach just to filming and just choosing what you want to show?
Oh, wow. I think it depends where the story is leading you and when you reveal information and how things happen. So, I think the thriller form is a great way of doing that because it keeps the engine moving and at the same time you can develop character. So I think it's a constant, um, putting out of information and story that you keep moving forward. And, with this, a zero-day event is obviously a real thing. It's never happened. A zero-day event is a flaw in software that can be hacked. and you can take down an entire industry, which is why it's considered a cyber weapon and the most powerful cyber weapon. And it's happened in various industries. It's never happened in every industry at the same time: transportation, aviation, banking, communication, the whole thing. And that is a terrifying thought. And how would we humans behave? We saw what happened after the horrors of 9/11. If that happened again, you know, how would we all, what would it take for us to feel safe again? And what civil liberties would you give up to feel safe? These are all like great dramatic questions to be asking and try to find answers to, if there are answers.
Well, in trying to answer those, do you feel like you have a different approach to a project when you're directing its entirety, or when you're just coming in for a single episode, or sort of scattered?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Like with Homeland, I was the executive producer director, so I was on for the entire series. But let's say in a season, there would be 12 episodes. I would direct 4 of the 12, but be there overseeing production for the subsequent 8. So I felt very invested having the best possible directors, and obviously the best cast and crew, so that you can tell this complicated story. So you want every hour to be its own unique chapter and move the story on. So I felt a huge investment in all of the 12 hours of every season, not just the ones I directed. But this was definitely a big undertaking. We shot for 103 days, and when you're dealing with crossboarding 6 hours, you have to be very clear for the actors and the crew and story. Where are you every moment, moment by moment? Are you in episode 1 at the end, or episode 6 at the beginning? And what has happened subsequently to get you to those places? It's a juggling act. But there was something invigorating and amazing about it. I mean, we had an extraordinary, a director's dream of a cast. Like, I don't even know what to say. From De Niro and Joan Allen and Angela Bassett and Jesse Plemons and Connie Britton and Lizzie Kaplan. I could go on, and Matthew Modine. It was, yeah, Jesse Plemons. I think I said Jesse. Just incredible. Every day I'd go to work and like, oh, I can't believe I get to work with these extraordinary people. And Bob was a great number one and a wonderful collaborator. And yeah, that was incredible and challenging to have, 103 shooting days. It was like doing 3 movies, back to back.
Well, I know that you've had the fortune of being part of a lot of very successful long-running shows throughout your career, and I prefer to look at the shows that didn't necessarily last as long, but I was happy to see: Boss, Last
Yes.
Resort, The Chicago Code. And I'm curious for you, do you have any others that are just like, that was a really great show and no one ever, didn't last very long, no one ever asked me about it?
Freaks and Geeks. Freaks and Geeks, one of the great shows. I just got sent a photo of myself with that whole cast, and that whole cast was just amazing. And, I came from being a modern dancer and a choreographer before I started directing, and my first actual series was Twin Peaks. And Twin Peaks was only a season and a half. So I look at that and go, really? That changed the face of television, and storytelling in many ways. So yeah, it's always fascinating what moves forward and what doesn't. And sometimes it is about the quality, and sometimes it just didn't find its audience in time. Like, I look at something which I was not involved with, like My So-Called Life, but got the pleasure of working with Claire Danes, and am developing with her now. And that show, that was a season. How is that possible? And it's had a huge impact on storytelling. So you never know. You never know when it's that meeting of time and place and material. But I love doing this crazy job. And I want to continue doing it till I'm like rolling to the set with my walker and oxygen mask. Yeah. Action. I love it. I feel blessed to be working in this crazy, wonderful business.
Can you tell me what's next, what you're working on right now?
I'm in the cutting room. I'm doing a pilot for Apple called Imperfect Women. Though I have to add, we have many imperfect women in the story, men in the story as well as imperfect women. But the cast is sublime also. Kerry Washington, Elizabeth Moss, Kate Mara, Joel Kinnaman, Leslie Odom Jr. And I'm in the cutting room now. And there is like literally, I am alone with my crew here. Yeah, so it's exciting. I'm in prep again to do another block as well. And I'm shooting in LA. So I should add how great that I'm shooting in LA in a time where LA is suffering on so many levels.
Absolutely. And what have you seen recently? What have you watched on TV that you're not a part of that you've really liked?
Adolescence. Oh my God, blew my mind. It's so exciting to see such good work. Yeah. And again, technically, it was amazing doing the single shot episode, but it was the power of the story and the power of the performances and acting. Because at the end of the day, that's what's the most important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's so much good work out there. And I always love stories, let's say with Zero Day, that tell both sides of an issue. There's no right and wrong. I love looking at both sides and things being ripped from the headlines with dealing with real, current and present dangers is always takes a lot of responsibility, but is also really exciting.
Really. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. It was such a pleasure to speak with you today, and looking forward to seeing everything you have coming up next.
Thanks so much. Great to talk to you, Abe. Have a good one.